Let's start the meeting. We're not used to sitting up here when we have our meetings. We're much more informal. So you'll have to bear with us as we go around the microphone and whatever. I'm going to call the meeting to order right now. And in accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, notice of this meeting was posted on the bulletin board designed for that purpose, and notice was transmitted to the official newspapers provided by resolution adopted January 29, 2017. So I see it looks like we have everybody here, and I'm wondering if anybody would like to make a motion about the minutes, or is there any questions about the minutes from the January meeting? Everybody's all right with it? Yeah. All right, then please mark that it was accepted. So we are glad that you're here for the Historic Preservation Commission's regular monthly meeting. I'm Carol Larrow, and the rest of the appointed commissioners are...
I'm Chris Morgan. I'm also on council.
I'm Caitlin Zaslow.
I'm Brad Slam.
Drew James. Jonathan Grummager.
Almost 50 years ago, the town council decided to save our wonderful town from destruction and unwanted changes because it felt magical like Disneyland. They created historic districts and provided in-depth ordinances to outline how to do that. Many books about Haddon Heights and the area, including information about our four pre-Revolutionary warehouses, are available for you to look at, borrow, or now to buy in the library. You've all heard how the HPC was adopted to save the unique atmosphere of the White Horse Pike and Station Avenue. And every 4 to 5 years, the town council has promoted the safekeeping of the districts by including special sections about them in the master plans. Indeed, our latest master plan from 2016 has many pages of why we should encourage and protect our historic districts. In fact, most of you bought a house in Haddon Heights because you love the look of it yourselves. Tonight, we will hear for the first time an application to demolish 501 and 503 Station Avenue. The house at 501 has been in continuous use since it was built in 1902 by Benjamin Crooks. He previously had built a house on the 100 block of White Horse Pike for his family. His wife then was concerned that families in Haddon Heights, which was incidentally incorporated in 1904, so that was 2 years after that building was built. The people in the town, especially the housewives, were unable to get fresh meat from the big cities. So her husband built 501. It was actually on White Horse Pike at that point, but then they changed it to Station Avenue, to have a side porch business as a market to provide fresh meat to the housewives of the time. Then he told her that they were also going to live in that house. And I've provided copies of this Crooks family and some of the history about it and other early people in Haddon Heights. They were back there on the chair. You can pick them up whenever you want. I'd like to start by correcting 3 misinformation statements from the recent edition of the Retrospect. I'm so happy that they're here, and they always send somebody, and it's good because then it gets out into the towns what's going on. I think that's great. The first one is that the 501 building was built in 1902, not 1930. The second one was the design guidelines book was published in 2021, not by the founding members, which sounds a little like we came over from the Mayflower, but rather that, it was some of us at that. And last Thursday was the first time I and some other commission members had seen any plans or renderings. While residents have decried the viability of the property in question, the commission has not yet looked at the application to determine its condition, house, building, and have not received a structural engineer's report on it until tonight when the new owners have provided that. Because this is the first time that the commission has seen any renderings, It was a little more than a week ago, many parts of the site plan were not included. And 2 weeks ago, when this was delivered to the service operations facility, trying to read the dimensions, because the application was 8.5 by 11 paper, and normally it comes as a site plan where the papers are about this big. Very hard to read the numbers just because of the size of the paper. We couldn't read the measurements of the proposed building. But I'm going to just say that we have some books. Here's the code book for everything at Hatton Heights, everything that happens. This book is just for HPC and planning. So we follow, and this is for all of it. This is all of the historic district books. So the things that we do are not just because we just feel like doing it for that night or whatever the reason might be. So we are charged with the duties outlined in Ordinance 450-104, which I won't bore you by reading. But our purpose is decreed in 450-100, and I'd like to read you some of it. So the purpose of the historic district: encourage the continued use of historic resources and facilitate their appropriate reuse. Safeguard the heritage of the borough of Haddon Heights by preserving resources within the borough which reflect elements of its cultural, social, economic, and architectural history. Maintain and develop an appropriate and harmonious setting for the historic and architecturally significant buildings, structures, sites, objects, or districts within Haddon Heights. Stabilize and improve property values and discourage the unnecessary demolition of historic resources. Foster civic beauty. Promote appreciation of the Haddon Heights Commercial Historic District and other designated historic districts for the education, pleasure, and welfare of the citizens of the borough and its visitors. Spur beautification and private reinvestment. Manage change by preventing alteration or new construction, not in keeping with the historic landmark or the historic district. Discourage the unnecessary demolition of historic resources and recognize the importance of all buildings in historic districts and individual historic landmarks located outside of a district, like our 4 pre-revolutionary war houses, by urging property owners and tenants to maintain their properties in keeping with the requirements and standards of this chapter. Tonight's agenda focuses on 501 and 503 Station Avenue, but it is really 2 different issues. First, we will discuss demolition and hear from the applicants about that. Then, we will consider the proposed building for the area of 501 and 503 Station. So I'm going to ask Mr., would you pronounce your name for me?
Anthony Giuel.
Giolelli, Mr. Anthony Giolelli, and Mr. Farrell, right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Would you introduce yourselves, what you do, who you are, and would you come on up and tell us what you have planned about the demolition, while you're doing the demolition, how you might be going about it?
Right here.
Yes, please, sure. You can even sit here if you want. You can just sit there alone if you want.
Where?
I don't know.
You should be able to. Or you can take the microphone off.
Yes, my name is Anthony Giuelli, Brooklyn Prep Properties, real estate developer. I've been in real estate for 15 years now. Our plans with the building, well, let Gary introduce himself.
My name is Gary Farrell. I've been doing developing for about 10 years, and we're very excited about this project and hope we can give you a little bit more insight on the property and our plans for it.
My name is Derek Spencer. I'm a co-owner and partner of Gnome Architects, located in Philadelphia.
So for demolition, we are proposing full demolition of the property based on the structural engineering plans, the condition of the property. We do think it is best for full demolition instead of renovation.
Could you go into a little more specifics about the whys behind that based on the engineering report or based on whatever other findings you want to have?
So if you look at the engineering report, as a lot of people know, the borough is the adjoining property behind us has significant water permeable surfaces that run into the businesses on Station Ave. Over the last 20, 30 years, The water has been going in the basement of Station Avenue, and anybody who's been in the property knows that the condition of it, the floors are all slanted. Throughout the whole entire property, the people who owned it before us did not properly remedy the situations. What they did is put Band-Aids on it, which over the long term just made it worse. 503 Station Ave we don't have a structural engineering report for that, but is actually in a little bit worse condition in the basement. It's just taken so much water, and part of our plan is to help mitigate those water issues and help the businesses on Station Ave from the water flowing into their property, which a lot of people in the borough know about this issue. As you can see, we have a cost estimated just to fix the foundation, which is not realistic for a building of, that size and
Where
condition.
would that be?
If you look in the page by page, there is an estimated cost for each of the structural foundation issues.
Is that in the folder?
Yes, it is.
And that totals up to around 150,000 for the remediation of that.
And that's just the basement, not any other floors. And as a lot of people know, that property hasn't been occupied in the commercial space for about 10 years now. The main reason being the condition of the property, and the guy had it listed for like 3 years, and couldn't get anybody to purchase the property either.
That actually was another question I had. When did the property go on the market prior to you purchasing?
I think it was over 2 years before we purchased it.
And you purchased in 22?
20, and about a little bit over, almost a year ago, we purchased the property now.
Okay, I'm wondering at this time, we do have quite a lot of people that have come, they either for or against, or just want to be heard. And I think maybe this would be a good time to do that before we start with all of our questions and all.
I think it might be better to let the applicants present the full application, and then, so
Well,
everybody else.
we're just doing the demolition. We're just doing the demolition first, then as a separate.
I don't have the
Yeah,
estimate.
because,
I'm sorry?
I don't have the estimate. Where?
We have an extra copy.
If not, we can forward it.
okay, so if you have anything to say about the demolition, we're just going to do that part first. If you have anything to say about that, you can come forward.
Are they, I just want to make sure, Jeff, if you guys said everything you want to say about.
As far as demolition.
So come up, and there's a piece of paper there by the microphone. You don't have to get up too close to it, I don't think. But you can just put down your name and your address. Thank you. And anybody that wants to have something to say about that.
Do you want me to write my personal address?
Yes, yes.
And before people start talking, can we mention one more thing is, when the building was previously redone, the building was not done to historical code, and therefore the building that is today doesn't really have the same historical, characteristics that the previous building that was built in 1902 has. Just wanted to note that along the way as well.
Yes, unfortunately, we're all aware of that. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm sorry, tell us your name.
Yeah, so I'm Rob Eunice. I live on First, right across from the high school. I also have known 517 station, which is 4 doors directly down from this particular building. I can vouch for the water problems because we've had to have conversations constantly with the owners of the buildings behind. And they're not really willing to do stuff, so there has to be an active, construction project to remedy that problem for everybody on that block. That's the first thing. The second thing, I personally went into that building and was looking at buying this a while back. I'm also a real estate investor and a local real estate agent, broker of an office, co-owner of an office. So, call what you want. I personally walked in there myself, and it's got a dirt floor. It's soaked. You can tell that there's been water down there for years. None of that stuff's been addressed whatsoever. And the reason I personally didn't buy the building was because with the asking price plus renovations, anybody going in there was immediately going to be underwater if they were to renovate the entire building. So that whole house, that building has to just be knocked down. Bottom line. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else about the demolition?
Hi, my name is Margaret Westfield. I live at 425 Whitehorse Pike. That's also our office. I'm a historic architect. I used to serve on the Historic Preservation Commission. I also served on the planning board, and I was in fact Haddon-Heights' one and only preservation planner. In fact, we had a preservation planner and really cared about historic districts. I wanted to just point out, most of my comments have to do with the second half, so I'll just limit them to the demolition, which you're talking about now. The ordinance itself, which is what guides you as members of the Historic Preservation Commission, the ordinance specifically says the commission's review shall be based on objective criteria, and then it lists the criteria. There are 7 for the demolition. And I just wanted to draw your attention to that and advise you that the last time 2 buildings within the historic district were proposed for demolition was back with Crestmont Bank and 324 and 322 Whitehorse Pike. And at that time, I was sitting on the commission. Bob Hunter was the chair at that time. And the ordinance specifically allows you to recommend to the planning board that there be a 6-month postponement of any demolition of historic district resources. And the reason for that is to give the applicant an opportunity to look at alternatives. With the Crestmont one, the historic district did, in fact, recommend that to planning board, and the planning board did do the 6-month postponement. During that time period, Crestmont Bank went back to their proposal, which was originally to demolish 2 buildings and build a new, larger building that would look like our train station, diagonally placed on the back of the site.
Margaret,
And during,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we haven't heard, the commission, as well as anyone in this room, hasn't heard everything from the applicant yet. So.
well, then why did you open it for
I
public?
was
We're just talking about the demolition.
Correct.
Right, so I'm just talking about the demolition. So I'm talking about how the stay of demolition, the 6-month postponement, allowed Crestmont to go back. They reconsidered their plan, and instead of demolishing the 2 buildings, they put a link and put the 2 buildings together, because together they were large enough to accommodate their banking needs. So there are always alternatives to demolition, but they aren't always obvious right away. So I encourage you to take advantage of that 6-month alternatives to be considered. Thank you.
Is it possible to respond to that? So noting the 6-month postponement, we, as you guys have owned the property for almost a year now. And during that time, we have explored all options. As of right now, we have, of the 3 units, the commercial and 2 residential, one of the residences moved out. We only have 1 tenant currently still in the situation and probably leaving soon. So we have spent this year exploring options, getting the reports, working with Derek, trying to talk to as many people as possible to get those options on the table. You know, to spend the amount of money to do a full new construction is not ideal for anyone, but, you know, I just want everyone to know that we did explore those options.
We explored those options before buying the building as well. As you see, we spent money to do a structural report. And that was part of our negotiations with the previous owner. Given the current condition, we were going to back out of the deal unless he, you know, was willing to adjust his price accordingly.
All right, anyone else about the demolition?
Carol, member of the commission, I'm Mary Finley Barber, and I live at 32 First Avenue. And I was kind of surprised when I saw the article in the retrospect that I didn't know that this was going to happen. I have to tell you, it kind of blindsided me a little bit, having lived in this town since 1979. And also living on First Avenue, we're also a local historic district. But one of the things I just wanted to point out, and this is kind of like really does concern me. You're looking at a corner property that buildings that abut 2 historic districts, Whitehorse Pike and Station Avenue. And these are districts, you know, these are streets and districts that are not only local, but they're on the state register and national. And it's a corner, it's a very high profile building. And the fact that you're going to demolish it, I mean, it's the first impression you get, you know, when you're turning off of Whitehorse Pike. It really is going to change the whole look of what you're going to experience if you walk down the street and also if you drive. But what I'm saying is, these two buildings, but especially 501 and one on the corner, I look at it as a gateway building to the district. And it really does say something about what we are. And you know what the irony is? Look behind you. You see this? You're looking at historic houses. I mean, Happy Place, we are all about our history. And it wasn't that long ago, I will sit down, but we had this historic guide through Happy Heights back in the early 90s. So that's what I'm going to say on the demolition.
All right, well, then at this time, I think we'll flow up.
Hello, my name is Michael Westfield. I live at 415 White Horse Pike, Heights. I just have a short observation tonight about demolition. I'm glad that we have an engineer's report. I do believe that if you just received it today, that doesn't give you a whole lot of time to digest its contents. And if I'm correct, there's no engineer or architect on the board, on the commission. They can give you a quick evaluation in one day about that. I would hope that you would give it some thought rather than taking the bottom line conclusion that they've given you for you, and digest the data and the information of that conclusion, and give it some time to really justify whether this meets the criteria for a demolition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing, if you don't mind?
Yes, sure.
One of the things I didn't mention was before I was in real estate, I was also an environmental engineer, what I did for a living. When I went in there, I can vouch for what they're saying. Now, I haven't seen the information that they presented on behalf of what the costs were associated with it, but if I went through that, I could probably give you a pretty good idea of exactly what we're looking at here. But again, the reason why I didn't buy the building is because there's environmental impacts and stuff that we're going to have to be remediated on top of the whole water problem in the basement. In addition to that, and I know this isn't regarding the demolition, I have to say that I think we can all agree that something has to be done to that corner. And we can talk about how wonderful the gateway between the two historic districts are and how it looks. But that's the gateway of both historic districts. In my opinion, it should be as nice as it can possibly be to attract more people from outside of town to look at Station Avenue as the tourist destination that Haddonfield and Collinswood is. That's all. Thank you.
Kathy Lang, 26 First Avenue. In regards to demolition, we haven't yet heard from the applicants how the demolition helps the water problem. The proposed building, which I saw for the papers that are here, is large in scale and mass and covers more property than the current house there. I understand from the environmental engineer's situation what possible problem is, but no one has said how demolition and rebuilding of replacing it with a building of that size and mass and covering so much ground affects the way the water can roll off that property or help the other people on the block or nearby. So I'd be interested in hearing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, we just received those things tonight. So we'll have a chance to look at them, I guess, but, yeah, go ahead, Martin. Were you gonna-
No, I was gonna say the same thing as Kathy said. But, I mean, obviously, your objective here is to, let me see what your objective as society is to collect, report, and preserve local history and respective sites, buildings, and family names, deeds, and cemeteries and congregations and so forth and so forth. Promote the appreciation of history. With all due respect, regardless of what this building, regardless of what I think of the building, we're talking about the demolition, and I have no filter, as everybody in this room knows, and I think it's a horrible building. But besides that, these people bought that knowing what our historic district is, knowing what their obligation is to advance the historic district and preserve the historic district. That's all I have to say. They can't just come in here and say they want to do whatever. You're the one ones who control what we do and protect our history. People come to this town because of our historic buildings. You can go down Wipers Pike and you can see Voorhees and our, Oakland and, Lawnside and whatever, all along the pike. And Haddon Heights stands out. It's like an oasis in the ocean. And you can't let somebody just come in and just demolish our buildings.
Thank you. One more?
I'm Bob Hunter, 213 Second Avenue. A couple of comments. One, I'm glad that you are interested in putting money into that night. So thank you for that. I also would suggest that at least the comment about 503 Whitehorse Station Avenue, excuse me, that's half of one building built at the same time. And Dr. Roush just put some money into redoing their half of that building. There is an engineer's report on 503. So if you're going to say that should come down because the other one should come down, well, Dr. Roush did put some money into the building right next door. I think they have a common wall. So that building does not have to, I don't think that meets your criteria for demolition. I would also suggest that if you've only received that engineering report tonight, you're the historic preserve, you're the HPC. Preservation is in your title. You can vote no to demolition, pass it along to the planning board. They're the ones with the power. They're going to say yes or no anyway. So if you do vote either way tonight on demolition, I would love it if each one of you would comment on why you're voting the way you are. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, well then that will close the public comment portion of this. And now we're going to discuss this as a commission, as a group. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add or say to that?
I just had, I was wondering if the applicants wanted.
We can't hear anyone.
We can't hear you.
As some of the members of the public mentioned, some concern with regard to the flooding remediation issues. I was wondering if the applicants would comment on that, on how the proposed renovations, should demolition occur, alleviate the problem in that area, because it is a known problem there.
Our engineer, who's very familiar with the town of Haddon Heights, or the borough of Haddon Heights, I'm sorry. He has worked on this property before, and that is part of his job once, we move forward with this project, if we move forward, is to design the property to help mitigate the water problems. I'm not an engineer or civil engineer, so the exact way, but again, we've hired a reputable firm that knows this property inside out. They've worked on the property before. They said the same thing when they walked this property, like, there's something that needs to be done here. Also, we are proposing a green roof on top of the property, which will help mitigate the watershed off of the building. And obviously you can design water to be we're going to be demolishing it, so we can design it to take the water and bring it out onto Station Ave instead of shooting it out onto the pike or into other businesses.
With the demolition done, we'll be able to actually get an idea from ground level, below ground level, as to what's going on and the best way to fix it. We do think there's other properties involved, but without this first step, there's no way to really gauge what's fully going on with the buildings there. So this gives us the best chance to remediate it. And, we are going to put our best foot forward to do that for all of those businesses.
And I think everybody on the board, everybody here knows that this has been a problem for a long, long time. And it affects the businesses, it affects, the people who own it. They have to spend money every time it rains hard, the water just goes right into their property. So we're going to do our best, and that's why we put the green roof to help Actually with, I think the green roof will be less permeable surface after everything's said and done.
Okay, thank you. I just want to mention that, that the house is a Queen Anne house, popular style in the 1880s and up to about 1910 with variations in the shape. It has a hipped roof with lower gables, and it was and is our oldest continuously used commercial building. It is on the National Register of Historic Places, as well, he said, the state of New Jersey, and of course the Haddon Heights Historic Landmark. So the criteria for review of applications and reviewing an application for its effect on an historic landmark or an improvement within a historic district. The following criteria shall be used by the Historic Preservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the Zoning Board. And it says if an application involves demolition or removal, the Commission's recommendation shall specifically include whether postponement should be considered by the Planning Board. If the Planning Board votes to postpone, the Commission shall undertake such investigation and take such action as the Planning Board requests. Since it's becoming evident, we need a postponement until we can take in some of this information that we have tonight. I think we should talk a little bit also about recommending that we put at least a postponement until the next month or something, so we can at least look at all this material together. So, let's talk like we normally do in a meeting.
I still have some questions for the applicant.
Yes.
When you purchased the property, were there any considerations at that time as to what your plans would be for that property if demolition was not on the table?
We did, we exercised, going through putting numbers on the paper and see what the cost would be to renovate it. Obviously, we were aware of the redevelopment, so we knew that there was some type of risk associated with all this. But we thought that we can put our best foot forward and design a building that would, obviously we can't build a 100-year-old building, but we can do our best to try to match some of the features that are on Station Ave, because both properties are on Station Ave, not Whitehorse Pike, Station Ave. So our architect, when we get to that point, will go through as how we designed it from the historical book. And we took exactly what the recommendations are and applied it to this project. We did a redesign of the building. We had an original design. After having some feedback, we decided that a redesign was necessary to try to make it a little bit more appealing for everybody, not just ourselves.
We did look at the renovation aspect.
Yeah, and that's the reason I asked that is it specifically has to do with demolition. I definitely have some other questions when we get into the design phase of what then you proposed. But I'm really, because I think we need to focus, we certainly want to have as much information as possible as to even the thought process as to where you guys were at with this as the new owners of that property. I personally very much value the fact that we have owners interested in that property. It's not an easy property to have owners interested in for reasons that have already been discussed. So, I just, as a member of the commission, would like to have the information as to, okay, what went into your thought process when you looked at it all, when you're making that analysis, and when considering how we get to a proposal like this, and what is potentially a plan B if that proposal is not an option.
So when we look at this property, I grew up in Haddon Heights, so this was a property that we looked at. We both used to live in the city when we graduated college, and we both came back to New Jersey. And we want to put our own office in this building and put our roots in Haddon Heights and try to help the businesses on Station Ave and try to make it a thriving place that it used to be. We've talked to a lot of the business owners, and there's a lot of support from the business owners about this project because of this building's bringing nothing to Station Ave right now. It's just bringing headaches, it's bringing problems. So we knew some of the risks going into it when we purchased it, but we just try to do everything in our power to renovate it. But as we got further and further in, there was just really no real solution to renovate it.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
I have a follow-up to that.
part of the code is looking at the economic feasibility of alternatives, and we just touched on that. So just playing out a hypothetical, if this doesn't get demolished, is there, what's the plan from there?
We'll probably just try, like, we'll have to reassess at that point. We really haven't we've put the numbers down together before, but then we would have to go back to the drawing board and see what's really possible there, from maximizing,
The current
the
situation.
current situation.
And I mean, I think, it makes sense to know why this property sat that way. Because everyone knew they couldn't renovate. We're at a point where the market dictated that this is not a property that can be renovated. That's why it sat for 3 years. That's why that commercial space has been vacant for 10.
Yeah.
Because it cannot be renovated.
I appreciate that. I think it's important that.
Yeah.
They keep saying that it's continuously occupied, but it hasn't been continuously occupied.
It's been occupied, but not in the sense of.
It has not been occupied for commercial.
Commercial. And it is the gateway to Haddon Heights. To me, that would not, in its current state in the past 10 years, that is not the gateway that I think everyone would be the most proud of, to be honest.
And this wasn't in the engineering report, maybe we'll follow up on this, but what's the life expectancy if if you don't do anything to this? Is it gonna be condemned? Do you have any kind of sense? Of
With the water coming into the basement and the supports, once you look through it, you'll be able to see the supports that were put in place aren't actually connected to the ground.
And they're rusting. They just put a post in the
Some of them
thing
are
that-
posts that do not connect to the ground and is this far off. And when someone steps on the floor, the post hits in the basement. And it goes like that.
I'm sure a lot of you guys have been in this
I've
building.
been around and I've read the report. I think a lot of this is for a lot of the people in
Yes.
the room as well. I'm aware that digging has to be done under the property to support this property. We're talking major foundational work. I'm also not saying that qualifies for demolition. I just think it's fair that this information is shared. It's been shared with us. In short term, I acknowledge that, and maybe we need to have a pause on our decision making for that. But there is a report that exists that covers that.
And even looking into the building, if you look just in the front window in the commercial space, there is not a straight line in there. You can see the dipping on the floor. Yeah,
You can see the gaps from where the floor meets the basement.
Yeah, it's pretty.
We decided that when the other tenant moved out, that we were not going to bring anybody else in because of the condition of the building. And we can't forcibly kick the people who've been living there out of the building and make them homeless. So we've made them aware, and, they're going to, depending on what happens, they're going to be looking for, another place to live as well.
Either way, they're most likely gonna have to relocate because we would have to do a major renovation.
Yeah.
So, we don't think it's in the best interest to rent out the vacant unit. It's just not suitable for people to be.
I have a comment. Bob Hunter's comments gave me something to think about that I haven't considered before, which is the property next door. Is the demolition of that property certainly would affect the attached building. Is there intent to do it? So do you already have a plan for that, or is there an engineering study to be done to assure that you don't
Our
negatively
engineer
impact
is
that other
familiar with
building?
that building, and there is a shared wall, but it's a party wall, so his building will not be affected.
If we have to underpin, we're sure the property will underpin and shore to make sure that, actually it'll strengthen his foundation if we underpin or shore the property. So we've done shoring and underpinning of properties before. It's a very common thing and something we're very confident in doing. Well, not us personally, but our subcontractors are, very confident in what they can do.
And you're talking specifically about the wall where it's Precious Flowers, and next to that, to the right of it, looking at it, there's another property there, or another piece that has been sitting for a while because the person hasn't wanted to do anything with it. But so now you're talking about the Precious Flowers and then the dentist.
No, we'll be
shoring his
property.
The dentist?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
That's required by when you do the demolition and do
I
the
just thought
rebuild.
for the audience, I can make sure that you know what you're talking. Any more questions?
Carol, could I just quickly ask, did they also own and did they buy 503, or is 503 in part of the plan that if it gets approved, they will buy?
We will be purchasing 503 regardless of the decisions. We're under contract and settling in June.
The owner has asked us for additional time, and that's why we haven't purchased it. He is in a busy season of flower producing and, delivering bouquets, but he's tired of that building. He knows the condition, and he wanted nothing to do with the building, going forward.
Thank you.
Well, I think that it seems to be becoming evident that we need a postponement here until we can at least get some professional input for ourselves, for us as a commission. So I recommend that the HPC ask the planning board to postpone demolition. They can do it for a period of at least 6 months, or we could just do it next month. We could just say, just be able to look at it and be able to talk about it and whatever we need to do. So at least that would give us some time to talk about the demolition, just to talk about the whole thing beginning.
Anybody have
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I don't think, I've seen enough and heard enough from the applicant. I did receive, and I appreciate that other members may not have had time to go over the engineering report, but I did review it briefly, and I did get the impression that the cost of renovating the building would be prohibitive to any real development going forward in there. To Mr. Hunter's point, in reviewing both the purpose of the HPC as well as the objective criteria for the demolition of a historic structure, I think the applicant has satisfied both criteria. I don't know, as has been pointed out, there are no engineers on HPC in its current form. So I don't know how much reviewing engineering report would really help us in our decision, other than to really provide the cost analysis between renovation versus replacement. I feel the fact that this building has sat unoccupied on the commercial part of it, at least, for so long, and has had such a difficult time being sold, is very telling with regard to the viability of that building as an ongoing commercial concern. With that said, I appreciate the age and the architecture and the contribution the building provides to Station Ave, as well as all of Heights historic districts. However, the building has not been maintained well, neither interior or exterior. It does not look like it may have once done in its heyday. And I think it is definitely less sightly than many of the neighboring properties. If it could be renovated in a cost-effective way, I'd be all in favor of that. I am convinced that it is not. And I don't think putting it off for a month or 6 months is going to change that fact. I think it's only going to make the building worse than it currently is. And it might even jeopardize future enterprises, whether it be renovation or replacement. I feel that at least we can have a separate discussion about the design proposals that have been submitted. But at this point, I'm only one member. I am comfortable going forward with the vote on the proposed demolition.
I know that you have received the material because you're on the redevelopment committee, right? But I've only just received any of this stuff tonight.
No, I only received yesterday, I received an email.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just feel like in my good conscience, I could not say go ahead without having a chance to at least look at it. And talk about it.
I don't have a motion. I will react to Chris's comments. I also received the engineering report within the last 24 to 36 hours. I did review it because I knew I had this meeting tonight, and spent a fair amount of time with it. I've walked the property a fair amount. I've lived here for going on 12 years, and there has not been any commercial activity in that property other than AT&T prior to their move to Eckerd. Since then, there's been no activity there. We've talked about the intersection of our historic districts and the meaning of that corner. And I don't think in the current state that what is there represents what, I can't speak for anyone else, but I'll speak for myself, what I would like the gateway to our town to be in its current condition. That is saying nothing to what would come in that spot. I also agree with Chris in that I don't know what would change in the postponement side. I will defer to some of my colleagues, and I would like to hear from them on pausing for evaluation of the engineering report. But I do not support 6 months. I would probably support at most 30 days to receive any additional information that they feel is necessary. But I feel that after my personal review, I have the information I need from this report unless there's other information that would be supplied. Thank you.
When I spoke to Mr. Gielli, close enough, right? Sorry. I spoke to you on Tuesday, right? We had been some phone tag and things, and that's when I asked you if there was a structural engineering, because I didn't feel we could go ahead without that. And you said that you had one, because of your purchasing, and that you would, get it to us. So I don't know, some people already saw it yesterday or today, but this is the first time that I have seen of this information. And truly, this is the first real demolition that we are talking about in the historic district. And as somebody that's been on it since its inception, it's been many years, it worries me because it seems like it might be the beginning of many more buildings. Because I do know that there's people in town that have purchased some of those buildings along Station Avenue, and they plan on demolishing them and building something else. And I do worry about whether we're going to keep the same atmosphere of Station Avenue. Of course, we can't all just sit back and look at the things and say, oh, look, this is what we had 100 years ago or something. We need to continue to improve what we have. But I think because we're talking about an actual demolition of 2 buildings in the National Register, in the State Register of Historic Places, this is an important decision. It's not that we are saying no to whatever is going on, but just that we need to have all our ducks in a row, as they say, to make sure that when we're talking about this demolition, that we know what we need to find out if we don't know already. There may be some things that we should know as members of the commission. And so that's the reason that I am recommending that we wait another month to at least have our chance to talk to our engineer about it, see what he says about it, and for some of us to even walk the property and maybe see what's going on, and we can get a better feel for it. So that's my recommendation. So I'll wait to see if there's any motions.
I won't give a motion, I'll give a reaction. I'll agree with the recommendation of 30 days. I don't think 6 months is needed. I read the report, I got it, I read it. It's not that very long.
Put your whiteboard. kindly use your microphone? Can't hear.
Can you hear now?
No, no.
How about now?
Yes.
Now it's working. So I did read the report today, and it wasn't very long, so it was, it was digestible. And I think 30 days is plenty of time for us to ask more questions, get an evaluation, consult with any of our professionals, just think about it a little bit more. I think we need the support for whatever decision we make. If you want to reach the criteria to demolish a property, I think we need to talk about the economic feasibility. To me, that's a big portion of it. I think the market has spoken to a degree, but to me, that's not determinative. I think we need to still see if whatever the actual cost is to do this work, it makes the site possible. And if not, then that leads towards demolition. If it does, then it leads towards rehabilitation. So I think 30 days is enough time to do that. 6 months, I think, would be too long, would be excessive.
No motion, of course, means that it is, that the issue is no, it's there. because
I will make a
nobody
motion.
made you one.
Carol, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we offer 30 days to get financial feasibility and an estimate for the work in regards to the engineering report. And then we will meet again.
Is there a second?
A second. We have I don't know if you guys are provided, I'm sorry.
Let's just finish this. So it's been moved and seconded. Yes, yes. So all those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
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 Okay.
All those opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So then that has passed. So here's what will happen. We'll have a chance to individually look at this, and I'll contact our engineer tomorrow morning and say, we have this, I'll drop it off in his office, see what he has to say about it, and we will know more, we will be able to know more about this. I don't want to keep repeating this, but I have only received this package, this application, less than 10 days ago. I'll say 9 days ago. It just, that, I'm not saying right or wrong, but the thing is, we don't usually go this fast, and there's no reason for us to go this fast. It's
We
okay.
did, I will say we did submit it in
The exact day you had to, yes, yes, yes.
it's not a quick process
Yeah, sure.
for us doing
You
this,
know.
going back and getting everyone's feedback and trying to make the changes that I think you can see from our first design to this
No,
design.
I can't, because I didn't see the first design,
And
and I didn't see this
and
until
again,
just.
and again, it can't be
just-
shared with everyone. So, going through this process is not the quickest, and again, to delay 30 days, are we able to still speak about design? this
Yes, we're
evening?
going to do that.
Okay.
We're going to do that right
Yeah.
now. Mhm. Yes, yes.
And we have a report that has an
Okay.
estimate. I don't know if it was this one.
Yeah.
We might
So
have,
that's-
it's the same report. All that happens is a structural engineer put estimated cost to it.
And again,
So we'll make sure that you guys are provided with that ahead of time. We apologize.
And on the application, there's no mention for structural engineer plans to be provided. That's why I didn't include it in the original packet. And the other with, the size of the plans that were submitted, there's nothing on the application stating
You're right.
full blueprint size
You're
plans.
right.
So I submitted letter size copy.
Sure. And what would usually happen is, because there's some variances that are needed for this, we get that information from our code enforcer. He didn't get it to look at it, and he didn't get it turned in until this past Monday. That said it had variances. Now, if this had been done earlier, I'm not saying we were wrong for not doing that, but if it had been done earlier, then we would have known that it was incomplete. And I did tell you about that on Tuesday when I spoke to you, that it was incomplete, but we were going to go ahead because so many people from the public had some investment in it. So that's what we're doing right now. Okay, so why don't you tell us about the building, all right? What is the proposal? Sorry, I think everybody, have you all seen the picture of the proposed building? Yes, if you have not, would you raise your hand, because we have pictures Okay, come on up, there's some pictures here, and I think that Sophia could put it also on the TV up there. We have some new system.
Did you want the,
Please, would you?
which picture?
Put the first one.
We
Of
have
what
the
it-
Pictures, but there's no scale or footage or setback number on there, so
Right.
it literally is
Right.
just
Is
picture.
she the new picture?
You know, there's no frame
The
of
picture that
reference
they
to
want
the
or the
existing
picture
building,
this?
or the buildings next.
No, the new
So we can see the
that's-
design,
Or,
but we can't
let's
see
see,
any.
this one?
Yeah, we
Start
don't
there, yeah.
expect a
Okay.
detailed blueprint, but there's nothing that even gives us any indication of height, depth, et cetera.
And again, we weren't aware we were supposed to supply
I
that to.
understand, and you know, sometimes we deal with, I'll say, people that have engineers and lawyers that come all the time, and they are used to the procedure. And so, this is like your first attempt.
But we usually do it with the planning and zoning commission, not exactly the storage.
It's fine, no problem.
So if you guys would like, I'll give you a quick run through the building here. So
Yes, please.
obviously
Just make sure
based,
we're all on page one, right?
well, if we can actually just start here.
Okay,
I'm
that's-
just going to give a brief overview, just to describe the building. So we are proposing a three-story building on the corner here. The ground floor, two commercial spaces at the ground floor. One space for Broken Ground Properties office, which is they'd like to put there, and then one more flagship corner commercial space that you can see there. You know, we are proposing the first floor of the building be clad in a painted panel. And then we have a brick water course down at the base. And then the residential entrance is actually on the White Horse Pike side, which you can see towards the right side of the building. We have some double doors there, so the residential entry will be pulled down the block just slightly. In the back of the property off White Horse Pike, we do have one curb cut that is proposing parking for the rear of the building. We have 6 parking stalls, as well as that's where the access for the trash pickup will be from in the back. So we do just have that one curb cut, which currently one curb cut does exist at that location. So we're going to be maintaining that to provide 6 parking stalls for the building. The second and third floor of the building will be a repeat floor plate that has apartments. So if we actually flip back a few pages. Yes, why don't we go to the ground floor plan first, and one more page back, please.
This one or?
Yeah, the other way. Yeah, so here you can see, sorry about that. So you can see the parking in the back with the 6 parking stalls. We do have one ADA van stall, which is required. So you can see the commercial space number 1. We're actually setting that back from the property line quite a bit. We're about 7 feet set back on the Station Avenue side, about 11 feet set back on the White Horse Pike side. This was important for us. Really wanted to open up as many sight lines for safety as we could. There's a lot of, you know, obviously a very busy intersection. Didn't want the building, especially the ground floor, to come and block those views. We thought that was really important, so we did set that
Excuse me,
back.
could you give us those numbers again, please?
Setback. The setback on the first floor, and this is just for partial of the first floor. You can see that the commercial space number 2 does come the whole way up to the property line, but commercial space number 1 is set back 7 feet from the property line. And I believe we're set back 11 feet from the property line of the White Horse Pike. The rest of the building along the White Horse Pike is set back 5 feet. You can see that next to the double doors into the lobby for the residences. There's some green space there. So that's a 5-foot setback for the rest of the facade along the White Horse Pike side, where we're going to be able to provide some green space. So like I mentioned, the residential entry is off the White Horse Pike. You come into the lobby where we'll have room for mail, packages, also access to a trash room. There's also an elevator there. The entire building will be ADA compliant and wheelchair accessible. So if we move to the next page, we can go up to the second and third floors. So this, like I mentioned before, this is a repeat floor plan, so it'll be the same plan at the second floor and the third floor. So we have 6 apartments per floor, 3 fronting on Station Ave and 3, towards the back half of the building. We have a mix of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments, all of a very nice size, and as I mentioned, all of which are ADA accessible by code. And we have a common trash room on every floor as well, with a trash chute that goes down to the dumpsters that will be on the ground floor for trash pickup. And if you go to the next page, there is right now a proposed common roof deck. So there's actually going to be two proposed common roof decks, one for the commercial space and one for the residents of the building. Those will be separated by a pilot house, which is an enclosure for stairs and the elevator to come up. So the two decks are not connected, so there'll be a private roof deck for the commercial space to use and a private one for the roof deck to use as well. Around the perimeter of the roof, we are setting the roof deck surface, the roof deck areas back a number of feet from the edge, and then we are proposing a green roof around the perimeter, both to beautify the roof and also for stormwater management. So the green roof is able to absorb a ton of water, and that is able to then slow that water down from overwhelming the stormwater system that's on the street. So the stormwater will slowly percolate through the green roof, then enter the system after it's been filtered through the plants. The plants absorb a good amount, but then a good amount of water does pass through into the stormwater collection system within the building, and then slowly released into the sewer system. And then just, to comment on someone else's mention earlier on how else will the building really help to mitigate the stormwater issue was, there is a lot of runoff coming from the property that's to our plan north along the White Horse Pike. So a lot of that water runs into, what we have proposed as our parking area. We'll have, adequately sized storm drains, which will then lead the water out underneath the building and tie in with the stormwater system that's underneath Station Ave. We were told by the civil engineer that there is not a suitable sewer to connect to on the White Horse Pike, so we're gonna have to go underneath our building, which is, part of the reason for this new structure. So if you want to move to the next slide, we can look at the height of the building. Like I mentioned before, we are proposing a 3-story structure. Up to our roof deck level is 35 feet from the sidewalk, which, we wanted to provide a nice commercial space for whatever tenant might come into that corner space. So we're holding 11-foot ceilings at the first floor, and then just under 9.5-foot ceilings at the upper floor. So wanted to provide a lot of natural light into those units. We have some nice windows on all sides of the building, or on 3 sides of the building. Sorry. So then we do have the pilot house, which extends up above the roof deck, that allows the stairs to come up to the roof, as well as the elevator for accessible access for wheelchairs. If we can flip to the next page.
When I was looking at the plans, I noticed that the higher on the corner, the portion on the corner, would be an extra 10 feet. So instead of it being 35 feet, it would be 45 feet.
No, the areas that would be at 45 feet are just the pilot houses. Those are where the stairs and the elevator come up, which they'll be set back from the street maybe 15 feet or so they wouldn't be able to be seen.
It would still be the top of the building, though.
Again, yes, it's something that I would, at least in a lot of zoning codes, roof access structures are exempt from building height, but you are correct. I'm not sure exactly how your zoning code is written, but to the top of the pilot house would be about 45 feet.
If it were to be beyond our zoning code, you would apply for a variance from.
Correct.
In the planning board situation versus an HPC.
Which in the folder, there is the variance table we put in there, which were, a full list of what we're expecting.
And zoning codes differ from the International Building Code, which would be subject to at this property. So the International Building Code does call roof height the actual building height, where roof access structures, as long as they're under a certain size, don't count towards the overall building height.
Thank you for clarifying.
So here you can see, this is actually the second iteration of the design process. Before this, we had a building that we had no setback along the White Horse Pike side and only had the recess first floor along the commercial space along Station Ave. So this was the efforts of a redesign that was here. The first floor was, before this was all cast stone, kind of like a nutmeg colored cast stone, to offset the commercial ground floor from the residences above. We really took the historic guideline packet into account. We read through it multiple times and pulled out a number of sections, which I have here, this printout along with some photographs that the board now has. So you can see a lot of the different things that we've incorporated here, which are the bright color panel that we have down at the first floor of the building to really separate the commercial ground floor from the residences above. That's something you can see all up and down Station Ave. The other one was the ornamental cornice up at the top, wanting that to be the same color to match below. One of the other things that's really well talked about in the historic guideline packet is, offsetting planes and not having huge runs of continuous walls. So that's why we incorporated a lot of these setbacks. So you can see along Station Ave, we have some recessed balconies for those units that are there. Also throughout, double hung windows, which are, a very classic style of window that the historic guideline packet does call out. So we are proposing some simulated divided lights with spacers in between the glass. A very historically appropriate window, something that we use all the time over in Philadelphia with their historic board. So we do have double hung windows. We're proposing a 2-over-2 arrangement on those windows. And like I mentioned before, they're about 5.5 feet tall by 36 inches wide each. So it's providing a lot of great natural light into those units. At the corner, we are proposing just to raise the parapet slightly, just to give a little bit more emphasis to the corner. We really think is a gateway building to the neighborhood. Providing a strong anchor at the corner is really important, so from an architectural perspective. We raised the parapets just slightly, about a 2-foot raise in the parapet around the edge there, just to really emphasize the corner, and we've added some arched transoms over those windows. And speaking of transoms, we do have some divided light transoms above all the storefront windows down at the first floor. That's another really strong element that you see in a lot of the historic structures up and down Station Ave. If you can flip to the next page, I could zoom in a little bit. Okay. Yeah, so here, this is just the full facade looking directly at the building from Station Ave. So you can see the entrance to commercial space number 2 is on the left. So there we have a very, similar condition to what you see up and down the street, which is a recessed door. So we have the storefront windows up at the property line, and they angle back to the door, which is set back about 3 feet. So it provides some nice coverage for, from the rain or for, people coming and going. And it is also just a very consistent characteristic with the block. We are proposing some lighting along the front there. Those vertical brass sconces are all around the base of the building to provide nice light, some ambient light for pedestrians, and safety as everyone's walking up and down that sidewalk. I'm going to the next slide potentially. Yeah, here's a little, just a zoomed in view of that commercial entry. So you can see that's really in line with a lot of those conditions that you're seeing. And then also we're providing the soffit material in that entrance and underneath the covered kind of arcade, you could call it, around commercial space number 1. We have a nice wood cladding in that space. So we have some lights that are shining up at it. It provides a nice warm glow for that space. Whether it could be cafe tables outside, or just gathering spaces for pedestrians as they're kind of walking up and down the block. You can see that we're also providing some space for planters that are off the sidewalk, fully on our property. That was something else that the historic guideline package really encourages as well. So that's a brief overview of the design. Was there one more page potentially? I'm not sure which views you have here. And yeah, obviously, there is a Welcome to Haddon Heights sign that's currently on the property. We wanted to make sure that was incorporated back into this building. I mean, as a gateway structure, it was really important to have that signage on the building. So we are proposing some brass lettering that's right there on that cornice to really emphasize the gateway nature of this building.
Is there proposed signage for the retail?
We didn't propose it. I think it would be. And in our prior proposal, it was on the glass, which I think is a really strong characteristic of the street. So I think in any future proposal for the fit out of that space or proposed use for that space, we would certainly include a proposal for signage on the glass for the actual commercial space itself.
And are there any renderings of the design with the current streetscapes intact?
No, we don't have that right now.
I need a feel for what this would look like as.
Yeah, we can certainly provide that. We did set the building, the original design, into the streetscape. Unfortunately, due to just the amount of turnaround time we had to produce this new one, photoshopping takes days. So we can definitely see the old, but we can certainly work on that and then circulate that.
And I'm sorry, it's like I took the floor from you. I apologize.
No, absolutely. I'm all done.
You supplied this here for us tonight, and kind of, I was coming in with this question that addressed it a little bit. What, in addition to the guidelines, when you look at Station Ave, and when you look at what in particular Station Ave, properties on Station what were you taking into account in the design of this building? So thinking as to how this building would fit in with our town, within our current, there's, as you pointed out, there are many different buildings from many different eras on Station Avenue. Could you speak to that a little bit more as to, you know, you did a little bit, but I don't mind if you go through even some, there's pictures here, but could you talk to us about what did you take away from some of the other properties on Station when you were thinking of the design?
Yeah, and the first time I walked up and down Station Ave and visited the site, I hadn't even reviewed the historic guideline package just yet. That was, you know, many months ago, was the first time visiting the site. I mean, the first thing I took away was just the walkability of the commercial corridor, the ornamentation of the buildings that are there, and just how rich the streetscape was. So we really wanted to add to that streetscape, which is, you know, a lot of the buildings address, you know, aren't set back from the sidewalk in Station Ave. They're right up to the sidewalk. They've got great signage in the windows, some like hand-painted lettering in the windows, merchandise in the windows. It was, you know, it creates a nice interaction between people walking by and the businesses that are, you know, in the storefronts behind the glass. So we really wanted to bring that up and bring the building closer to the sidewalk, but at the same time, a lot of those buildings do have a nice recessed feature to them, whether it be just the doors or maybe a small setback in the commercial storefront itself. So those are a lot of things that we took into, even the original design was really just, you know, how do we create a nice pedestrian experience for the people that are walking by the building. And then, you know, after we really got into the historic guidelines, I mean, it gave us a lot more to work with here, and, you know, we really wanted to incorporate a lot of what's in this document, from the ornamentation that was added, the painted panels at the ground floor, the angled storefront glass back to the commercial doors, and a lot of the planters along the sidewalk were all things that we really took away from the historic guideline packet that we put into the redesign.
We have a shortage of parking in town. How, with that many units, 12 units, I see this.
Can't hear you, can't hear you.
No, my mic's on.
Thank you.
I saw 5 normal spaces and 1 handicap, but you must have a plan for a lot of additional parking somewhere.
So we've already negotiated with another property to secure 10 additional spaces on that property to lease from the hours of 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. That's, you know,
4 p.m.
4 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Overnight.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the buildings on Station Ave have about 100% lot coverage and no parking, so we're trying to do our best to, you know, not make the parking situation any more, I guess, more inconvenient. So we've already gone out and talked to businesses to make sure that we can try to alleviate the parking situation.
Okay, so that, come again, how many?
10
additional spots.
So 16 total plus the 1 handicap.
Okay.
It's a little more than 1-to-1 per unit.
And nothing for the retail.
I'm sorry?
So for the retail.
Yeah, there are some
on
the other properties on the block. There's no retail parking. It would be on the street just like the other properties. But during the day, especially across the street, I think that public parking lot's, you know, sufficient during the day, plus the street.
Thank you.
And just the one thing is now you saw is how we're going to do some of the water remediation and how we're going to funnel it out to the appropriate places, which also goes into with the demolition that we spoke about previously. There's no way to do it without demolishing the property.
Okay, well, why don't we, at this time, why don't we take anything from the public, if you have a comment or a question or something, and then we will deliberate or talk about it as a commission. So please come up if you have something you want to say.
And we're going
Again,
to one
please,
more thing.
again,
Sorry.
please put your name and your address on the paper by the microphone. Thank you.
We note one more thing is, one of our plans for this is, obviously, there's not a lot of outdoor space on Station Ave, so for the commercial rooftop, we are going to attempt to work out a rentable space that other businesses can use and also set up, you know, a type of program where we can recommend the businesses that are on Station Ave to partner with them to provide catering, to provide various services that are available on Station Ave.
Okay, thank you. I don't know that we mentioned that it was a mixed-use building that's proposed.
Correct.
Because it is office and it's commercial and then it's residential. So
Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
don't be sorry.
Tell us your name.
I'm Helen. I live on 1825 West High Street. I'm super excited about this building and the opportunity for our town. I had a couple of questions, or just like one, for the commercial space. Do you guys have any plans on the types of businesses that might go in there? I know that in Haddon Township, there's an apartment building very similar to this, and I would love to see small businesses be able to go into a space like this. So I just want to hear your thoughts on how you're going to help the community and the businesses that are there.
For the corner property, we don't have a set business. We thought maybe it could be good for a restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the inspiration for this was the Herside building in
Yeah.
Collingswood. Herside's in a very similar building. They have beautiful outside seating. For the second commercial space, if allowed, we'd like to put our office there,
Nice,
you know, to be in town and kind of throw our roots here.
awesome. Is there only two?
Two commercial spaces.
Awesome, perfect.
When you get to the size of the commercial spaces,
Yeah,
you can't really break it up too much because then you can't really bring, you know, a good anchor in there.
yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Margaret Westfield, 425 Douglas Pike. Clearly thought a lot about materials and detailing and the fenestration, but if you could go back to the main rendering, that one, yeah. Because there are no adjacent buildings shown in this, it's really hard to perceive how incredibly massive and large this building is. It's almost 83 feet wide on Station Avenue, and then the walls go up 35 feet, which if you look at the ordinance under section 450-110, the criteria for review in regard to application for new construction, there are 12 factors that you're to consider. This violates 6 of them. First is height. The height of the proposed building shall be visibly compatible with the adjacent buildings. We have no adjacent buildings that have 35-foot high walls to a flat roof. The second is proportion. The proportion of the building's front facade. As you noticed when we went through, the facade here is very wide. The proportions of historic buildings in town are more vertical in character, not horizontal. The rhythm of the spacing of buildings on the streets, this is probably most critical because they're proposing to demolish 2 buildings and they're going to span over the property line. You're losing the rhythm of the buildings along the street. Because we have, you know, the property lines establish the width of buildings that are built on them. The minute you get cross over a building property line, suddenly you're building a building that's twice as large as any others, which causes a problem as far as rhythm and spacing. It also violates number 8, which is roof shape, because it's 3 stories tall with a flat roof. The majority of our buildings have sloped roofs. Number 10, the scale of the building. This is really the critical one. The size of the building, the mass of the building in relationship to open spaces and the other buildings in town. The scale of this is enormous, and you can't really perceive it. So since you're going to have an additional 30 days, perhaps you could then do that Photoshop drawing where you put this into context so people can see how incredibly large it is. And finally, number 11, the directional expression of the front facade, the fact that it's so horizontal in character instead of vertical. So my feeling as a historic architect that for more than 30 years has been specializing in the contextual response from new construction in historic context. That's what my husband and I do. That's what the business is. We consult other architectural firms throughout the state. Right now, we're consulting for new construction at East the Elephant. just National Historic Landmark. If you only build a new building where the existing 501 is, then that new building would be able to fit into the historic district because it would maintain the height and the width and the proportions and the rhythm along the street. If the problem with this application is that it's proposing to replace 2 buildings with 1, and that just throws everything off.
Just in comment to that, in the middle of the street is a very wide building that's 3 stories with a flat roof, with apartments above it and commercial on the bottom, right dead center of Station Ave on the same side. Also, the building across the street is 3 stories, directly across the street from us.
But that has a mansard roof.
I get it, yeah, and we're gonna take these up with the planning board with our zoning variances.
And for the sloped roof, it doesn't allow us the chance to have the green roof and the water mitigation. That's one of the bigger parts. With the sloped roof, there's nowhere for the water to go other than down to the street. And doesn't really help with a lot of coverage.
Margaret, actually, I had some questions, actually, a lot of expertise here in town.
Yes, absolutely.
Specifically on Station Ave. As I walk Station Ave, I live here, I feel there are a fair amount of flat roofs on Station Ave, I'm strictly speaking Station Ave. Station Ave, can you hear me? PNC Bank, the library, the building we're in right now. So when you're speaking about slope roofs, I think of a lot of the historic homes in town and things like that. Could you expand on that a little bit in regard to Station Ave and the business district and this, kind of what you?
Absolutely.
I value that opinion.
I mean, basically, because this is a corner building and you're gonna see this in the context of White Horse Pike, which is where I live, in the National Historic District. All of those buildings are, because they were residential originally, have sloped roofs. You're absolutely correct that once you turn the corner and you get on the station, you start seeing commercial buildings with flat roofs. You don't see any that are 35 feet high. So that's one of my concerns is the overall height of this, the proportions of this.
Okay,
I
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question. How many bedrooms do you have in combined in all the apartments up there?
We have 18,
And how many parking spots total?
maybe 16.
So that's less than 1 parking spot for every bedroom that's in there.
For every
That doesn't include the commercial property downstairs. Now, assuming you have a restaurant, which you were talking about earlier, in that corner, where do you propose these people park?
Similar to the other properties on Station Ave that don't have parking, we'd assume it'd be on the street or in the public parking spot.
Did you ever come to Adam Heights on a Saturday or Friday or Saturday night?
Yeah.
Did you find a parking spot?
It's,
That's anywhere.
that's anywhere we're at. And
Go to Columbus.
And very similar to the building that this is designed after the first
People
side.
that live above Michael's jewelry store, where do they park? They park behind Ralph's Pizza, they park along Lambs Avenue, they make it happen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just like
They
this
make it happen.
person.
I do think that the economic benefit of the restaurant supersedes the inconvenience of the park.
Okay. And the other question I have is the green roof. I'm thrilled that somebody talks about having a green roof. But the green roof is not going to prevent the runoff from the property next door. The green roof is only going to collect that rain that falls within the perimeter of the green roof.
But the demolition will allow us to assess the runoff from the property next door.
And we can only control our own property, we can't control other people's properties.
Okay, but then that's, my point is that you can't say it's going to control the runoff from, that's down, but.
We didn't say we were gonna fix it, we said we were gonna help solve the problem. There's multiple properties that are involved in this. And as you said in the beginning.
And if they're willing to work with us and the borough's willing, we will do everything in our power, to correct it as much as possible. But, we have the studies, but until the demolition is complete and we can really see what's going on, You know, it's really hard to say. Hopefully that happens and the other neighboring businesses would join us in remedying this problem.
And sorry, to answer your question, man, a lot of the water that would be down at the ground level, we're gonna be putting new storm sewer or storm grates in the driveway. So that'll collect the groundwater. It'll all be sloped to those stormwater inlets, and then it'll be pumped or piped underneath the building to the stormwater collection system that's underneath Station Ave.
Okay. The other question I have is, did you get a structural study before you purchased the building?
Just the structural engineering
Yes.
report, yes.
When did you get that relative to when you were purchasing the property?
About a month before.
Yeah, about a month before.
So you got it in June and you purchased the property in July, is that right?
We got this in May and we purchased the property in June.
Okay, and then in between time, the borough did their redevelopment, is that correct?
Yeah, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
I don't mind, I'm gonna make two more points. So first, addressing the water, right? So a lot of that stuff's coming from behind the buildings on Station Avenue. And I think that's the common conclusion at this point. I think that the surface area that this building is gonna cover, if they're gonna end up doing the infrastructure under the ground to connect to the sewer, the main sewer line under Station Avenue, is gonna have a considerable impact on the amount of water that we can actually physically control. Because right now, you can't control any of the water that's coming off of the back of the buildings behind Station Avenue. It's literally all going behind all of those buildings. And I can, Joe and I can preach, can tell you that we have gone behind Knowlton Interiors, our building, 517 Station Avenue, as well as George Wise's building. And I've had to cut back a ton of brush and all this stuff that just soaks in all this water coming from those buildings back there. If we can control at least half of that block, we can then at least identify where the rest of the water is coming from and address where it's coming from on the other properties. The other point I want to make is on the top of the parking, right? If anybody looks at what Collingswood, Westmont, and Haddon Township has done over the course of the last couple of years redeveloping the area, I think we can all agree that there hasn't been an influx of parking. They're not going down there and saying, we're gonna add additional parking here or there. They're giving a couple parking spots to every single building that comes in. Look at Tacanelli's that just opened, right? Tacanelli's has barely any parking. I personally went and parked 4 blocks away because it was a destination that I wanted to go and eat at, right? So I don't really think that the parking problem regarding this building is gonna be relevant enough that somebody is gonna say, well, you know what, I'm not gonna come to Haddon Heights because I'm not gonna be able to park. They're gonna park on the side street because the destination is gonna draw people in, not parking.
I think I remember hearing something, and I don't know if this is true or not, but there's a property that belongs to the borough, I believe. It goes from the White Horse Pike to Atlantic Avenue, and it's kind of like a cut through now. And was there any discussion about that being something that the borough would pave that from White Horse Pike to Atlantic Avenue, and then that would be all parking in there?
We have not had discussions
Nothing
with the borough about that. That would be.
I mean, I don't think the cost of it, would be substantial.
Hello. Jennifer Moore, Cedar Avenue. So it's not a fair assessment to compare Haddon Heights to Collingswood, Haddon Township, Westmont. Those towns all have the Patco parking lot, which most of the time when I go to eat or do anything in those towns, I was parking in Patco. That has hundreds of spots, so you can always find parking. In Haddon Heights, we don't have that, so parking is a big concern. So hopefully that could be addressed.
I just wanted to share my thoughts on it. I have a lot of concerns about the parking that's been proposed, but this is the Historic Preservation Committee meeting, and we're not really assessing the impact of parking on the historic aesthetic of the business district. So I appreciate and share many of your concerns about that, but I don't think it's appropriate for conversation this morning.
Am I out?
Yes, you are.
Jim Mercurio, I own Roads and Real Topics across the street. Listened to for almost 2 hours now why we shouldn't do this. Everything's been pretty much negative. These gentlemen are looking to spend several $1 million here in our town. I think maybe what needs to be done is look at what we can do for them rather than what we can't. Help them achieve this goal. Gentlemen, I do give you this advice. Michael and Margaret are very good at what they do. You might want to talk to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lois Conway, 204th Ave. I don't have a lot of facts and figures to throw your way. I'm pretty much aesthetically looking at this. As I look at the back of my house and look at this every day. This particular building does not say anything that says Haddon Heights. I have lived here over 40 years. I have lived at this house, actually, over 40 years. I happen to live in the historic district. We have pretty much kept with what the historic district looks like and has been keeping it up to, as has the White Horse Pike. And I was not here for the section about, I caught the end of it on YouTube about the demolish it and whatnot. I didn't catch about that. I will tell you that a lot of the houses have problems with water. If you are downhill or up, there's a lot of creeks that run underneath this area. This particular Station Avenue has a lot of problems with water, the 500, the 600 block. That's a bigger problem than what any of us are going to solve here tonight. I'm talking about aesthetics. Okay, this is a very nice building. I just don't happen to say that it is the gateway to Haddon Heights. It has no gables, it has no points, it has no little windows sticking out of it, it has nothing that screams the building that is turn of the century, which is what Haddon Heights is. My home is 1905, a lot of them in the area is. We don't have black windows, most of them are white. Black is very modern. Yes, multi-pane, that's what we have, yes. We don't have bulky square columns like this, we don't. Yes, the storefronts pretty much look like ours. They're recessed, you know, a lot of times the doors are recessed. I don't have a problem with the storefronts at all. The blocking of Welcome to Haddon Heights, that's not our print either. But it's basically the building. The building is a block. The bricks are fine. If you're not going to have, clapboard or whatever, which is what a lot we have. We also have bricks from the era, which is much easier to maintain. I appreciate all the water and all the drains and everything that they're willing to do. But a lot of the water and whatnot and the runoff from the parking in the back can be remediated with a lot of planting greens and stuff, not pulling out shrubs and planting a little bit more dirt to suck up some of the water. That's a lot of that problem. But aesthetically, and having nice warm wood underneath, that's not what we have. You want to paint blue underneath your porch? Then yeah, that's what we're talking about with Victorian or turn of the century porches. That's what we have. This does not say Haddon Heights at all. People come here for the feel of a charming town. Over half of our town has those houses in it. And that's what people come here, like, oh, that's a great quaint town. That's what we have. Do we have a mishmash of downtown? We do. Because, 50s and earlier, they didn't care about historic and what it looked like. All right? Luckily, some people decided that it was kind of important to keep some of the history of what towns were. And I've had many people that drive up and down the Pike and say, you know what, your town looks really great compared to a lot of what the White Horse Pike looks like. And I'm awfully proud of that. And I'd have no problem with redevelopment, but I'd like to keep it at least to what Haddon Heights really looks like. Thank you. You gentlemen ever come up with an alternate design or an alternate plan?
Well, like we mentioned before, we did have an original design that we had informal conversations with some people in the borough about. Like I said, we had cast stone on the first floor. We had larger casement windows with no divided lights. The building did have a much different aesthetic. And then we did do this redesign, taking a lot of the considerations of the historic guideline packet and other buildings up and down the street.
And the sheer cost to do multiple designs is a little excessive, so we tried to put our best foot forward on this one and, kind of modify from there. It's not really financially feasible to do multiple. And actually was mentioning, about the White Horse Pike. We understand it is gonna be different than the other properties on the White Horse Pike, but we are 501 and 503 Station Avenue. So we're going for more that aesthetic than the White Horse Pike, while trying to, understand we still are on that corner.
I think that one of my concerns with the first floor is that along the White Horse Pike, what we're seeing is two blank areas. So one of them where the trees are on the right there, and then the other one where where the people go underneath for the parking garage? Wouldn't that be an opening there? I'm talking about the two spots that look like they're solid. It doesn't show up so much on that particular.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Just on the far right of the image
Yeah.
is a wall that is blocking the parking from the street. We threw around a few different options, like, because we did want to put a window there, but a window then just looking at a car behind seemed a little odd for a historic district. We would be open to maybe doing some window openings in that wall, maybe infilling them with maybe like a mesh screen that vines or different plants could grow up or something like that. Those are different tactics that we've used on other projects in the past to, mimic a window opening, provide some more area for additional green space. So that's something that we could certainly consider, but we're open to suggestions on the Historic Commission's preference on how we treat that wall.
Okay, yeah, because that is an important part of Hat Nights, is people coming up and down the pike.
Of course, and we wanted to be sympathetic to the parking, so that's why we
Yeah.
provided as much parking as we could.
Yeah.
We had to put it somewhere, and then, I know a lot of places want to screen that parking as well. We don't just want to walk down the street and see a parking lot or look at the side of the car. We wanted to, shield that from view.
Sure. And then also, there doesn't seem to be a green verge there that's going to be going along the White Horse Pike.
Again, it's just in shadow of the building there. There is a small strip of green space. We can get you guys some better rendering, maybe an aerial view looking down onto that sidewalk
Yeah,
area. to
and
show
I'm thinking about landscaping,
Absolutely.
to, kind of soften it a little bit and go along with what else is going on.
One of the-
Pike. The Shade Tree Commission is a very good place to start looking for an appropriate tree that would not block the signs or whatever. I can get you that if you want. It's a list of trees and how high they are.
One of the comments we got is the kids that walk by in the sight line to the White Horse Pike, and that's why we're trying to keep as much away from that corner, because of the kids going to and from school, and that was why we set the building back from our original design. Also, just wanted to recommend, or just to point out one thing, is everybody talks about the White Horse Pike and the beauty of it, but if you see, a lot of the buildings along the White Horse Pike are becoming in disrepair. There's 10 White Horse Pike, I think it is. The building right across from where all the condos are, the building next to that, the apartment building that's right next to 128 White Horse Pike, like, there's no historical value in that. There's a lot of buildings that don't have any historical characteristic, and a lot of these buildings, because of the maintenance and the character of these buildings to keep up with them, are becoming, a blight on part of the White Horse Pike.
I'm sorry to hear you say that, because.
I didn't mean it in a negative way.
But we've had a lot of properties that have really come before us with wonderful things that they have done, and like new pediatric dentists, and all these new businesses are coming in. I won't say that they're knocking on the door all the time, but we are seeing some of that. I know what you're saying, and I guess that's just part of the turnover. The thing with the historic district was not formed until 1975. So that anything that happened before that just happened. That's a little, I'm sorry, you've been sitting there a while. Yes.
My name is Joseph Gentili. I am a resident of Haddon Heights. I live on Sycamore Street. I live in a historic home. It's not registered or anything. It was built around the 1890s, and I'm a big history buff. That's my thing, and I fell in love with this town and its history many years ago. And I don't know everything. There are people in this room that know more than me. And I just learned about this building's particular history recently. And I saw it, and I say to myself, this building could be more. And really, you take any random inept business, you take, so let's say somebody opens up a new butcher shop somewhere else on Station Avenue. And this place was a butcher shop for maybe 20, 30 years. So I understand this is the oldest building in the entire business district. This is important, but nobody knows what it is. I see it as an AT&T building with crappy blue siding. And it's just not what it could be. It's not what it was. And that's how a lot of this building exists today that we stand in, because of a misrepresentation towards historic places. You know, the original town hall was demolished because people wanted things that were new. And that was progress. And in this instance, progress is what is needed. And I don't know if this has anything to do with, people are talking about water and talking about, parking. But it's really, it's up to, this entire discussion to realize that this building is here, embrace it. And, if you think it's that important, put up a sign. These guys are building something, and they're putting their time and effort into this because they have a vision for this town. And whether you agree with it or not, they want something. And if they're gonna make changes to make us happy, okay, sure. But this is their vision, and people 100 years ago had their vision for this town. If Conrail comes along and says, okay, so we want to restart some sort of passenger line, but this stupid old station has to go, what would we say about that? Now, we come along and say, we want to build this brand new building, and it's big, and honestly, I look at it and I see Philadelphia, and I see, this is East Philly. Whether you like it or not, this is contemporary, this is new, and it's embracing progress. This town was built on progress. We are a railroad town. And this I see as something that is going to move us forward into the future. We are going to lose historic buildings, but we can do what we can now to put them in their significant place. So if you're going to drop a building, put up a sign. This was here. It's the oldest building. Take some pictures with it. And it's really just important to know that the significance of the building matters more than the age. I will care more about the bank. I will care more about the, what is now John's Market, the American General Store. I will care more about something like that over a old AT&T building that is uninhabited. Maybe not by residents, but downstairs, you see nothing. You see an empty building. And if there's gonna be more business here, then, and this town, I've heard many people say, we need more. Now, there's been more, a lot of it, in the past maybe 10, 13 years, my entire life. I'm 14 years old. But this is another opportunity. And I say, in the spirit of progress, the railroad, the train station, and the entire basis of this town, I say that we need to embrace the progress and consider the possibilities that this can bring us.
Thank you for speaking. Please come. I'm Beth Borchers. I live at 1009 Sycamore Street in Haddon Heights, which is a historic property of the Colonel Joseph Ellis House. So we're dated back to the 1700s. So I have a true appreciation for the history of this town. Everyone here who's worked on the history of preserving White Horse Pike especially looks beautiful. It does stand out. So I have a real appreciation for preserving history. I live in a house from the 1700s. I understand when houses go, when things happen in old houses, very old houses, and disrepair sets in, and you can't address things, sometimes just because of economic reasons, for whatever reason, it's not always possible to keep things up and keep it going. And when something is beyond repair, sometimes it's just beyond repair. And we allow the historic plaque to go in front of our home. I have residents stop every day in front of our house. We enjoy it. People come up and talk to us. It breaks my heart to see any historic property go, but when it's beyond repair and it takes years on the market to get a buyer for it, and it's at the cornerstone of our house, of our town, when you walk in, you only get one shot at a first impression. And that first impression, when you turn onto Station Avenue, and there's looks vacant, I know there are tenants upstairs, property for year upon year, it's a bad thing. And so I think we have to find a way to embrace progress and embrace building something new and paying homage, like the young man said, to what was there. We're very good with our signage in town, and people are interested. So as a historic homeowner, born and raised in Haddon Heights, my family has been here for generations. I love everything about the town, but we don't live in the 1700s. We don't live in the 1800s. We don't live in the early 1900s. Okay? We are in 2023, and it's okay to have some things in our town from every era, to represent every era of our town, not just the past. Honor the past, but we're still growing. So we have to honor every era, and that's just my opinion, and I just wanted to share it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Michael Westfield again, 425 White Horse Pike. So we're sort of in a what-if scenario here, since we kind of tabled the demolition question. We're talking about the proposed new building. We've heard some of the issues about criteria for a new building in a historic district and some of the problems with the design. I'd like to kind of step back and look at that and say that my perception here is that we're talking about two buildings that are being replaced by one building. And I think if you look at the elevation on Station Avenue, the image that shows the elevation, that's why we've had such a wide, broad, hulking building here. A lot of horizontal lines. The architect's done a good job of unifying this. I don't have a problem with this style. I don't have a problem with what he's doing there. Contextual design is really difficult. As an architect, I can tell you, I've been 30 years in this, more than 30 years doing this, and it's one of the hardest things for an architect to do. I think the issue here that I'm finding, the problem I'm finding is it's unified as two buildings that were there before, and now it's the width of two buildings. It doesn't read like any of the other historic buildings on Station Avenue. There are other buildings that are big, large, tall, whatever, but none of them quite this proportion. If the architect could look at this thing and somehow, why do they have to replace 503 as well as 501? I mean, why not just replace 501? Because firstly, they enter my mind. Secondly, why can't this look like two buildings so it has better proportions, better massing, better architecture, better streetscape feel, make it fit in better to the historic district? I just think that this is an attempt to take sort of a cookie cutter, generic Voorhees, Marlton, suburban mall type of building and plunk it down in the corner. I also think it's out of, like we've said, it's out of context here. We don't see what's happening beside it. We don't know if it's in not only Station Avenue, but White Horse Pike. Two very different characteristics, architectural characteristics. They're two different historic districts for different reasons. It's hard to balance those, and I appreciate that the architects having a difficult time with that. I just think this could be so much better if we're looking to accomplish this with minimizing the number of negative things in the criteria. You just step back from it for a second and see how this could fit in better. I think that's a key concern I have. Thank you.
Mike?
Yes.
you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Experience, and you said you had a lot of information there. The one thing that comes to my mind as someone on the commission, these are two different districts. The address is on one of the districts, it's not on the other district, but visually, of course, it's in two different districts. One of the things we're tasked with is maintaining and improving the commercial business opportunity in town, certainly in the business district. It's in our ordinance. I'm just curious, you have a lot of thoughts. Do you have thoughts on how do you have retail, what's being proposed, and also tie in to the historical nature of two different districts? And that may be for a different time, but I mean.
Yeah, sure, no, it's a good question.
You kind of brought it up,
Yeah.
and I think that's really at the core of a lot of the design side.
Yeah, the design side here, you're right, it is trying to balance two very different
Exactly.
opposing.
At the same time, maximizing the opportunity that is in front of all of us here, as young Joseph eloquently put a little bit. It is 2023, and if there is going to be a demolish, whatever is put there is going to be built in 23 and 24, with materials from 23 and 24.
Sure.
So,
And there's nothing in the historic preservation ordinance or any Secretary of Interior standards that it's based upon that says a new building has to look historic. That is completely false history. You don't have to do that.
Right.
But to do a modern building, a contemporary building that somehow otherwise fits in, you have to recognize the characteristics you're trying to fit into the context. And that's why I said that this is a difficult spot here. You're dealing with two different districts, two different characteristics. The White Horse Pike is large lots, single buildings on it for the most part. Yeah, there's a few interspersed in it that just don't belong, and they're non-contributing. There's a couple of apartment buildings built in the 50s, they're not contributing. There's a couple that are falling apart that, okay, some of the owners aren't taking care of it. Still, the underlying buildings have a certain characteristic on the White Horse Pike. The same thing can be said for Station Avenue. You have individual buildings that may be linked, but they still read as individual buildings for each address for each property. Some of them are separated, some of them are linked. They all have architectural characteristics. They're not talking about what style are they. They're talking about how do they deal with massing, proportion, scale, all those pieces. Yes, you can take pieces of historic architecture, paste them on a building and think it looks good, but that's not going to solve it. That's not the right answer. So I just think that turning the corner here, giving yourself, I personally think the first floor images we've seen look really nice. There's some very nice things going on there with the retail space, the office space. I'm not sure it should be office space in the first floor, but that's something for the planning and zoning board to decide. I just worry about when you step back from the first floor and look at the overall thing, when somebody pulls into Station Avenue from the White Horse Pike and they see this, it just doesn't feel like it belongs there. It's contradictory. It's somehow it doesn't belong to either district. That's my biggest concern.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm Mary Finley with Arbor and 32 First Avenue is where I live. I just have a couple of issues here. Again, parking, and I know that's going to be for another, but going from 2 units, residential units, to 12 units, and there's usually more than one driver. Okay, I have to tell you truly, I can hardly find a parking space sometimes, even when I'm down on Station Avenue, but it helps me to walk. There's shadow effects with this was my concern, okay? And I'm looking at page, because I had printed this out, page 4 and page 5. See, I have a concern about the overhang, okay? See, where the overhang creates shadow effects, and we don't have another building like that on Station, that looks like that. And that, it's interesting when you're walking in sunlight on Station Avenue, and then you have here, and it's darkened, okay? You have mentioned that you have the lighting on the columns, the pillars, I guess, but see, it still creates a shadow, and so in other words, for me, it looks like it's gonna be out of compliance also, for that effect. And I also have a little bit of a concern with the rooftop deck. Well, whatever you have, the pilot, reflection, that it really will be 4 stories. You know, like, it really will have a 4-story look about it, you know, instead of the 3, very high elevation. And so that's really, again, I guess going back to what Michael was saying about how this building relates in terms of the context to the other buildings, you know, in terms of material signage, height elevation, you know, setbacks. And you know what? My husband pointed this out to me. On your rooftop deck, let me see, I have it right here. He said to me, he said, make sure you ask about what do they have as barriers? In other words, we couldn't find it on your plans or whatever, and if you look at the picture here, like we were trying to see, and to what extent that would be seen, you know, like when you're driving, going down Station Avenue, across the street or whatever, like what will the barrier look like, the guardrails,
Yeah, the
whatever?
guardrail. Yeah, so you
Yeah.
you can see very slightly in that picture, there's a kind of a black, almost like a wrought iron fence. So 42 inches high around any walkable surfaces, code compliant. But that'll be set back between 5 and 8 feet from the edge of the building, so it won't be seen at all from the street.
See, that's what we were trying to figure out.
Yeah.
You know, to what extent it would be like seen, you know, as part of the visual landscape.
Yeah, the goal of setting back the roof deck on all sides was to make sure that it was not seen at all from the street.
Okay.
So you can actually see on page 5 where you can see the section of the building, you can see the railings and where we dimension a planter setback. It doesn't have the exact dimension in there. Like I said, it's
Okay.
between 5 and 8 feet. We can, you know, get it.
Yeah,
Sorry, maybe we have different numbers on our
Okay.
package. This drawing here that
Oh,
shows,
okay, gotcha.
you can see those setback guardrails around each.
Which page is it?
Yeah, right there. Yep, so you can see the planter setback is shown there, and then we had the guardrail that's set back, like I said, between 5 and 8 feet.
yeah, it's just a very strong visual impact, you know, I mean, it is.
Well, it won't be from the street, you won't see it at all from the street.
Yeah, I still would though, I'll be honest with you. I would like to see how the building looks in terms of the context of the other buildings that are right nearby.
Absolutely.
You know why? Because I'm just saying this, you know how when you go down the shore and it's almost like a nightmare? You see these little bungalows and then you see like, you know, 3 or 4 story, you know, side by side or, you know, triplexes and you're like, oh my goodness. You know, and I guess I'm a little bit concerned that it may have that same effect.
Totally understand, and I mean, we really looked at, you know, how many stories this building was gonna be, and we saw the 3-story building across the street from us, thinking, a lot of, you know, urban planning concepts talk about a strong anchor building at the corner. So that's why we even emphasized the corner, as you can see on the renderings, by popping up the parapets around the edge by just 2 feet, just to stronger emphasize the corner. So I know we are probably a little bit high, I don't know, I didn't take a tape measure of the building across the street, I know it does have a mansard roof on it. But in looking at that building, I didn't think that really meshed a lot with, I mean, there's a lot of different architectural styles up and down the street for sure. The building across the street with the mansard roof, we looked at that and we looked at this building and said, hey, should this building have a mansard roof? And we thought that it wasn't really appropriate for this building at this time. Granted, you know, maybe that changes, but maybe in talking with the community members and HPC, that maybe a mansard roof is found by all to be the most appropriate option. But that's why a 3-story building at this location we thought was the most appropriate choice for the number of stories. And in terms of the height, you know, could we cut out a couple inches of ceiling height from each of the floors in the residences? Yeah, we probably could. And if that's if 1 or maybe 18 inches of difference in building height, really drastically changes the opinion of the neighbors and the community members, sure, we can definitely look into that. But wanting to make sure that we provide a nice commercial space for a nice tenant to move in there. I mean, you wouldn't want to be in a restaurant with 8-foot ceilings with, ducts going over your head and air registers, right? So that's why we provided an 11-foot ceiling, which, to be honest, in a lot of commercial spaces, the ceiling is even higher than that. But we wanted to kind of manage and match some of the other, like the cornice line that happens between our first floor and second floor, where that blue panel turns into brick. We wanted that to align as best we could with the rest of the street. So in our next presentation, we'll absolutely include a lot more Photoshop images showing this building.
Yeah, I think that will be important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, you can see, here's a copy of the original design that we had before. So that is photoshopped in. Again, the
Okay.
trees kind of block the view to the neighbors, but
Right,
you get a little bit more of a sense of the streetscape there for sure.
okay.
So we'll make sure to have more of that.
Right, and the whole safe schools thing, like you had accounted for that.
That's
you know,
exactly
the
why
whole
we
things,
pulled
right.
in that first floor to make sure our sight lines were very open.
Yeah, I think the context is critical.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
And just to make mention to some of the comments earlier, absolutely, definitely appreciate all the comments. In terms of the building looking as one building now as opposed to two buildings, that's the truth of the nature is it will be one building. And we talked about not wanting to falsify history. Making this building look as if it were two buildings, in my opinion, would be falsifying what this building is. This building is functioning as one building. It is designed as one building. That's why we chose to treat it all with the same materiality and chose not to separate off this one chunk where an existing building used to be. And that's why we incorporated those recessed balconies about halfway down the facade. If you want to flip back to the rendering. So you can see there, it does kind of break up the mass. Granted, it doesn't separate this into one building and the other, but if you actually flip to the next page, more straight on view, you can kind of see that we were trying to create some symmetry over commercial space number 2's entrance, that double door that's recessed. That's why we have those double hung windows directly above and one set of double hung windows on either side before you get to that balcony. So we were trying to create some symmetry there, very similar to some of the symmetry that occurs at 519 Station Ave, which is a 3-story brick building with a strong cornice line. It looks like residences over a first floor commercial space. So we were kind of taking some cues from that building as well. But that's kind of how we were treating, granted, we do agree, it is a long stretch of facade, which is why we really wanted to play around with some depth there, which is why we recessed those balconies to kind of break up that mass.
Doug Hill, 501 Whitehorse Pike. I have the same concerns about the building that Margaret brought up with the scale of it. To me, it looks like we're trying to put an apartment building down the gateway to Haddon Heights and with a couple little spots for retail. I just think the scale of it will dwarf that area compared to what's there. I don't think it fits in as far as not that it's not a nice building, but that the scale, meaning the height of the building compared to the overall look of Haddon Heights. My other concern as a small business owner, Haddon Heights has a mishmash of small businesses downtown. Where do you put the signs if you have a small business that goes into your commercial space? Or is this going to be just office space?
Again, the actual leasing of what business is going to be in there isn't up to me. That's more so on the owner.
I mean, the way the design is, it's not designed as a storefront. I mean,
It would be
where
on
do
the
you put a business
glass.
sign?
On the glass is where.
Yeah, so
we touched on that.
as part of the historical guidelines, it does recommend businesses to have their signage on the glass itself, which would definitely be a great possibility for what would happen.
And would you have under lighting on that overhang?
Yeah, we would. It's not, we haven't gotten into every detail of every light on the project, obviously. This is growing from a concept rendering into something more and more real as these conversations are ongoing. So we are showing the wall sconces around the outside, but we can certainly include some recessed lighting up in the ceiling shining straight down.
And how much more footprint does this combined building have compared to the existing space?
The existing building that's on site now.
Existing two buildings now. How much
If you guys
bigger
could
is
speak to
this?
how much, I don't know the exact square footages of what's on site right now.
The 503 Station Ave is pretty much at least 75% lot coverage. I think ours is probably in the 60s.
I think you're just talking about square footage of the commercial space.
The full footprint, yeah, so I mean, it's 70% is the guideline, we're at 75% lot coverage with this proposal.
So you're over
And we're trying to mitigate that with the green roof as much as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that concludes the portion, the public portion. I just wanted to make sure that I heard something correct, that the number of commercial units would only be 2?
2.
So then how many office buildings would there be then?
Just 2 commercial.
Just do commercial. One would be us, and we would be looking for another commercial tenant.
For the corner, we'd like to put.
If we're allowed to be in that building.
If we would be allowed to be, as an office, I understand it's retail. If, that would be a variance we'd ask for planning. But the corner would be restaurant or retail.
If you go to page 2 in your packet, you can see commercial space 1 and commercial space 2 and the square footages associated with each.
There really isn't too much room to split it up into 3, especially with the 11-foot and 7-foot setbacks. I think we thought the sight line would be a little bit more important than having a larger commercial area.
And most of the people we've had conversations with about possibly taking the area said they need, most of them say the commercial space as is too small. I mean, like if you look at 503 Station Ave, those offices are the commercial spaces are very, very tiny. They're very, very narrow. They're not welcoming when you walk in as much. It's kind of just like a long run. You don't really see anything.
Okay, well, maybe since we are extending this application for a month to get the demolition, maybe we should also do that with the application, the application for the new building? That with some of the suggestions and the things that we talked about, I think that we still we don't know about the variances yet. We don't have any listed materials or things about the windows, what kind of windows they are, any of those important things that we have, that we do. So, and we do landscape, and there's a lot of other things that we do, issues that I'm not seeing on any of these people.
So if you go to the last page in your packet, we have some material call-outs on the rendering. We don't have a specific manufacturer or model of things like the windows. We could certainly provide a cut sheet of what we would provide. We are looking at the historic line of windows that Pella offers. We have a strong relationship with Pella, and they provide a very nice historically accurate window. That's something that we would probably propose here. And we can certainly send over a cut sheet or a shop drawing of that window for your review.
Sure. Okay, all right.
I think it'd be important to see that, the street rendering.
Yes, yeah.
Proportions.
Yeah, doing that.
I'm concerned about proportions.
Yes, okay.
Is there anything else that is an absolute must that you guys like us to provide, just so we can get working on that?
No, I just think that in lieu of the adjournment of the vote on demolition, I think it would be redundant to have the vote on the proposal at this point. I think, based on the conversation that we've had, based on public comment, if there's anything you want to supplement your application within the interim, obviously you're free to do so. After we adjourn, I'll give you my contact information if you need to get in touch with me to send me or anyone else on the committee some information. I'm sure we'd all be receptive to it. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank everybody for coming out tonight. We appreciate it always. Have a good night.
Thank you, Gary.